America, land of supersizing. But have they supersized Pokemon as well? Hi, I'm Katzer, and I have spent way too much time reading the Pokedex. I crochet life-size Pokemon, which means I need to know what size Pokemon are, which means I have arguably an unhealthy fixation on Pokedex heights. When you spend a lot of time focusing on the Pokedex and sizes, you'll quickly notice something, and that is that Pokemon are sized in intervals of 10 centimeters. Now, there is size variation between Pokemon within a species, and some of the more recent games like Pokemon Go and Pokemon Legends Arceus have shown a Pokemon's exact size in their individual summary, which is amazing, and I love that feature. But most Pokemon games do not include size in any individual summary, and if you want to know a Pokemon's size, you have to look in the Pokedex, which shows a standard or average size of that species. And this is where you see that interval of 10 centimeters. I am Canadian, so I am fluent in metric, as is Japan, where these Pokemon were originally designed, created, and released to the world. However, Canada is part of North America, which means that I play the North American version of pretty much every Pokemon game that I've ever played. And because North America essentially just means America, all of the Pokemon games I play have measured those Pokemon in freedom units. And when you play without metric measurements, you quickly notice that the pattern is actually intervals of 4 inches. And this is where it gets interesting. 10 centimeters does not exactly equal 4 inches. That is not a precise conversion. That is a rounded conversion between the two units. 10 centimeters is the equivalent of 3.94 inches. Or to flip that around, the 4 inches is equal to 10.16 centimeters. So it's very close. Like, you know, yeah, they found the nearest whole unit they could use, and it is very close, and I'm sure a lot of people would argue insignificant. But they're not equal. Yeah, if you don't find the rounding of these numbers interesting, maybe you don't find this fun fact interesting. But if you would like to go all in on this pedantic fixation on Pokemon sizes with me, I say to you, you are my people, and it gets more interesting. So because this number is rounded, that means that every time we go up one of those intervals, the rounding error actually increases. Because if there's a difference of 0.1 centimeters between the 10 centimeter Pokemon and the 4 inch Pokemon, that means there's a difference of 0.32 centimeters between a 20 centimeter Pokemon and an 8 inch Pokemon, right? So it grows each time we repeat the interval. And so, because of this, there is a correction eventually in the Pokedex to adjust for that. So by time we have a 70 centimeter Pokemon, which is converted to a 2 foot 4 inch Pokemon, there's almost half an inch of difference between those two things when you convert 70 centimeters to inches. It's almost half an inch of difference between those two Pokemon. And so something interesting happens when the rounding difference crosses the threshold from something that you would round up to something that you would round down. So when we go up by one more interval of 10 centimeters, that 2 foot 4 Pokemon doesn't increase by 4 inches anymore. We get a 2 foot 7 inch Pokemon because now we're rounding down. The exact conversion of that 70 centimeter Pokemon is actually 2 foot 3.56 inches, so we call it 2 foot 4. But the 80 centimeter Pokemon actually directly converts to 2 foot 7.49 inches. So we round down to 2 foot 7. So in Japanese and different European games, we will see consistently through the entire Pokedex intervals of 10 centimeters all the way up. But in the North American versions, we see intervals of 4 inches until 2 foot 4, and then an interval of 3 inches to correct for that difference. And then from 2 foot 7, it continues by 4s until we hit 7 foot 10, and we have our next 3 inch interval. And then it continues by 4s until we hit 13 foot 1 inch. So there's always going to be a point where we need to correct again. You came here for the answer to a question that I posed, and I would like to answer that question. So here's what we're doing. Because that Pokedex does make corrections at 2'7", 7'10", there's not a straightforward answer, right? So we know that 4 inches is bigger than 10 centimeters. So you want to just say, yeah, American Pokemon are bigger. But then we correct, because actually the 80 centimeter Pokemon is larger than the 2'7" Pokemon. And all of a sudden now it's flipped the opposite way, and the metric Pokemon are technically bigger. And then that holds true from 80 centimeters up to 150 centimeters is when we next see it flip back around. This pattern continues throughout the entire Pokedex of flipping back and forth which measurement, which unit yields a bigger Pokemon based on the rounding. Frequently, it flips back and forth. So, with the help of Bulbapedia and their page of Pokemon arranged in order of size, I have counted how many Pokemon fall into each of these different categories of when it's larger in North America versus outside North America. And I have made a complete list of how many Pokemon are larger in America and how many Pokemon are larger in Japan. Results are in. Out of a total of 1,201 Pokemon from this page, sized individually, so which means that this does include like regional variants that are technically the same Pokemon, but they're a different size, so they get a new dex entry. It also includes some Megas, not Gigantamax, because those are crazy. But out of all of those Pokemon, 57% are larger in America. Woo! So well done, America. You've done it once again. Congrats on having, on average, larger Pokemon than the rest of the world. So thanks for listening. I hope this answers your question. And if you are still here and you have enjoyed this silly little delve into the Pokemon world, this is what I do. So click the subscribe button. I promise I have more. And I'll see you next time.